where the military mission is far, far from over. To the east is a nuclear-armed Pakistan that is just a short while ago stood on the precipice of a potentially devastating conflict with its arch rival India. To the west is a recalcitrant Iraq with a dangerous leader who Iranians grew to know all too well during a long and bloody Iran-Iraq war. And to the north are the undemocratic, potentially energy-rich states of Central Asia and the conflict-ridden Caucasus. And to the south are several American allies that sit atop the largest known oil reserves on the face of the earth. So it is not an understatement, in my view, to say that the direction Iran takes in the coming years will have a significant impact upon American strategic interest in the region. Clearly, we cannot speak of Iran's direction without addressing its internal political dynamics. Since President Khatami's election in 1997, Iran has been embroiled in a gradually escalating power struggle that the outside world has watched with considerable interest and sometimes with some bafflement. While elections haven't been perfect, the Iranian people have made clear in 4 separate ballots over 4 years that they are demanding fundamental change. The results of these elections have been the creation of a divided government, an elected branch consisting of a parliament and the presidency that, by definition, is more in touch with the will of the Iranian people. Juxtaposed to that is the appointed branch, which holds many of the key levers of power, including the judiciary, security organizations, and other bodies populated by those whose vision largely revolves around the perpetuation of their own authority, in my view. It is this hardcore clique which refuses to give way to the will of the people. Over the past few years, they have thwarted the goals of Iranian reformers. They've arrested journalists, they've imprisoned close allies of the president, and often resorted to violence. They've harassed and prosecuted minorities in Iran, Jews and Baha'i. They direct policies that pose a threat to our interests as well, not the least of which is that Iran continues to support terrorism and the escalation of violence in the Middle East. Its recent involvement with the arms smuggling incident is a reminder of the policies that Iran must abandon if there is to be a true rapprochement. And many questions remain unanswered about the role played by some Iranians in the Khobar Towers attack that left 19 U.S. servicemen dead in Saudi Arabia. But shortly after September 11th, ordinary Iranians held a spontaneous candlelight vigil in Tehran in solidarity with the victims killed in the United States. Yet some of the Iranian leaders don't appear to understand how drastically the world has changed since September the 11th. Their continuing support for such groups as the Islamic Jihad put them on the wrong side of a new fault line, separating civilization and those who seek chaos. As you all know, Iran is continuing an aggressive drive to develop weapons of mass destruction and long-range missile systems. In these efforts, it receives considerable foreign assistance, especially from Russia. While support for terrorism appears to be directed by those in the hardline branch of the government, the support for Iran's missile and nuclear weapons program seems more broadly based. The reason is a combination of 3 main factors, in my view. First, legitimate fears over Iraq and, to a lesser degree, Pakistan. Second, the belief that nuclear weapons will enhance Iran's stature. And finally, we cannot dismiss the fact that some elements within the government see a potential blackmail value in the acquisition of weapons of mass destruction and long-range missile capability. But whatever the motivation, the United States must place the highest priority on preventing Iran from gaining such dangerous and stabilizing weapons. And I don't mean merely by the use of force. There are a number of options we have for doing so. We cannot simply dismiss Iran's security concerns, as some in this country are very ready to do. They've been the victims of a chemical weapons attack by Iraq, but the neighborhood has the potential to change for the better and maybe change their thinking. Already, the Taliban menace no longer threatens Iran. Next door, Pakistan's president is resigned to attempt to deal with religious extremism. And I believe that the U.S. will ultimately have to facilitate a regime change in Iraq. These three developments alone would drastically alter Iran's security environment for the better. No Taliban, a different Pakistan, and an Iraq without Saddam Hussein. We must also be willing to hold discussions with Iran to develop creative solutions, as we began to do with North Korea. And we must step up our efforts to end support by Russian entities for Iran's nuclear and missile efforts. In my view, this hasn't received nearly enough attention in the past few years. Clearly, although we must combat the spread of weapons of mass destruction to any country, the threat from Iran is not simply a function of capability, but of intentions as well. If Iran evolves in a more democratic direction and the U.S.-Iranian relationship improves, then the threat it poses certainly is much reduced. This then raises the question of the ongoing power struggle underway within Iran. The United States is not in a position to have a major impact on this struggle, in my view, nor should we intervene in any, nor should we intervene in any direct way. We should be mindful of the painful history of our two countries, which includes reported CIA support for a coup in 1953, and it still resonates with many Iranians, and it should counsel us to be extra cautious. Nonetheless, we should be clear about where we stand. We are squarely with the Iranian people in their desire for a democratic government and a democratic